A very good Thursday evening. Stats Race Lens users coming to you from Oceanport, New Jersey, from Monmouth Park. They drew the Haskell today. A big weekend, really across the country. Del Mar, Saratoga, Monmouth Park. And we hope that tonight we can help you with Saratoga on Saturday. We promised a few weeks ago to get into the summer racetracks, and that's what we're going to be doing. They've got a terrific card at the Spa. There's an outlandish group assembling for the Bing Crosby on Saturday at Del Mar. We probably won't really get a chance because the PPs aren't even up for Monmouth, but maybe a couple of thoughts from the team. And let's welcome in first Ellis Starr. Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Looking forward to a great weekend with great weather at Saratoga. We still don't know about Monmouth. We were just talking before we came on, but Saratoga looks like mid-70s and wonderful. So great racing for the race we'll be talking about tonight.
And, of course, the stakes action, Amsterdam, the prequel to the Alan Jerkins, the former King's Bishop, on Travers Day, the Vanderbilt, which leads into the Forgo, the end of the meet, the Bowling Green, which, in fact, the United Nations winner, Big Picture, ended up a little bit of a surprise entrant, and the Jim Dandy, which, of course, sets up the Travers Stakes and brings together a Derby and a Preakness winner. Doesn't happen all that often. Dan Tordjman, the other thing that's looming on the horizon with every passing day is EquestriaCon, and nice that you get maybe an hour's respite to talk some racing from all the organizing going on for the convention.
Exactly, and that being said, I'll make apologies ahead of time for anything I say on this webinar that doesn't make complete sense. So, yeah, no, really excited for EquestriaCon, obviously coming up in a couple of weeks up at the Spa, and excited to dig into these races this weekend here with you guys.
Let's start and talk about right away the Amsterdam, because we do have a bunch to cover, and there's some deep fields, and wouldn't mind having a couple of minutes at the end to slip in some thoughts on the 7 that'll assemble in Oceanport for the Haskell, because it's going to end up being a very important gathering. Only 3 grade 1s for 3-year-olds going 2 turns left before the 3-year-olds start facing elders. And we'll talk about the Jim Dandy as well. And, of course, the Curlin tomorrow is going to feed probably a horse or 2 or more into the Travers. And let's start, Dan, with your thoughts on the Amsterdam. And what's nice about Friday and Saturday, we've got some horses in the Curlin and horses in this Amsterdam that are kind of auditioning for the next level. And that's certainly the case with Coalfront, that there's a pretty big buzz around.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly seems like the one who kind of jumps off the page, coming off 2 wins that he won by a combined nearly 9 lengths. First level allowance when last out. I mean, just doing it with absolute ease. It's a $575,000 purchase. So stay thirsty. And really, I mean, you got all the live usual connections up at Saratoga. Pletcher, Velasquez, and everything about this horse screams, ready to pop and fire a huge effort in a big spot. So I think it'll be really tough, and obviously we can expect the price to be short. And what I stumbled upon, just looking at Stats Race Lens, if you look at Todd Pletcher, one of the trainer angles that I wasn't even aware that you could search for when you modify your searches here is looking at stats based on closing odds. So we can project here, even a couple of days out, that this horse is going to be a really short price. So if you look at Todd Pletcher, past 5 years, and if we adjust for the specific conditions of this race, I mean, at least in terms of it being a dirt sprint and a graded stakes, and if you look at closing odds, as you see that Ellis was scrolling over a minute ago, if we use his horses that have gone off at odds of 2-1 or less in this kind of situation, you'll see that the numbers are, I mean, not unexpectedly, but the numbers are extremely solid. You're looking at a 35% win percentage there, 52 starts, 18 wins, and then of course the in the money rate is going to be extremely high too. Now you look at the ROI, it's not great, but if you're looking for a horse, if you want to go in, if you're playing the multis, and if you're thinking, hey, this is a spot to go short or maybe go too deep, you can probably proceed with confidence here. Ellis, if you could modify to even take it a step further, we looked at 2-1 or less. If you want, you could even look at horses that go off at odds on, and the numbers there are equally good when Pletcher has horses going off odds on in spots like this. So there you go, 57%, 12 wins from 21 starters. And if you narrow it down to Saratoga, I mean, you could literally specify, you can go down to, bring it as specific as you'd like. If you use only today's track, you can go ahead, and I can guarantee those numbers are going to be even better. So we'll wait for those to pop up. And there you go. You got 4 wins from 5 starts. Those names that you recognize there probably, Competitive Edge, Fashion Alert. That's a name I always struggled with. Ki Katie, Kauai Katie, and Turbulent Descent. So yeah, I just thought that was a cool feature, because I always wonder in these spots, you got a short-priced horse, what's this trainer's history, in situations like this, going off at short odds or odds on. And so I think we know, based on experience, that Todd Pletcher's numbers are solid. But I thought that was an interesting feature to point out. And so Cold Front, I think, poses a real serious threat. If I were to talk about one other horse, it would be the 5-horse Excitations. Just from sort of a fan's perspective, I think this is an interesting horse because he's owned by the Fairgrounds Racing Club. These racing clubs that have popped up around the country at various tracks are always fun, give fans an opportunity to buy in, get an ownership stake in a horse, and even if they're not taking out a percentage of the purse money, they still get an ownership experience. So to see a horse like this, who, even on pedigree, is a horse that was pretty impressive, and to see him having a bit of success, and you can see if you go back to some of his earlier races, this is a horse who was beaten just ahead by Gervin on debut, and was then dominant in 2 ensuing sprints, winning a 7 furlong allowance by 4 lengths 3 races ago. And I just think, they obviously tried stretching him out. I think the cutback here should help, since he was really nowhere going longer in his last 2. The Dam was great at Stakes Place, and I think they've got a good one here. And so I think this one should definitely take a step forward on the cutback. And like I said, just from a fan's perspective, it'd be interesting to see a horse like this do well in this spot.
Did you also, there was an interesting thing you mentioned to me about Singing Bullet.
Yeah.
Singing Bullet with Phil Romans, right?
Yeah, so this is another thing. Yeah, this is, so if you look at, exactly, and this is, again, one of these features on stats that I just stumbled across recently, but I think it's a great feature. When you see a horse like this one, who obviously improved dramatically, first-time Lasix last out, winning that allowance optional claimer there at Churchill, I kind of wonder, I always wonder to myself, well, okay, yeah, obviously the horse took a major step forward, first-time Lasix. What can we expect next time, the second time out on Lasix? And so one of the things you could do here on stats is you could click the trainer, and you can search, precisely for that, second-time Lasix stats. The search that I did that yielded some interesting numbers would be, let's see, as this loads here, looks like we got bounced back to the...
Yeah, a little technical glitch. Sorry, hang on.
I'll slow down, stretch out my words.
There we go.
Yes. So yeah, I think you've got it mostly set up here. Past 2 years, sprints, and then you've got, let's see, Romans last...
5 years, and we talked about it. We did
That's
a
right.
last-time winner.
And a last-time winner, yeah. Applying all those, specific, sort of things that apply here, all those factors that apply here, and the numbers, fairly strong. 8 starts, 3 wins, 6 in the money. So you just always wonder, will there be a significant drop-off second-time Lasix? Was that improvement just sort of directly a result of first-time Lasix, and what can you expect next time out? And so I just thought that was a cool feature, and if you keep playing with the numbers, you can build out a larger sample. You can look at the past 5 years, and you could look at
Well, I
whether
think we
that,
could take away dirt sprints and just do the whole set. It's one thing you could do also if you wanted to do that, and just change dirt and sprint to all starters.
sure.
And by the way, one of the things I want to point out is everybody's watching. For those that don't know the power of individual research, you can see this takes seconds. I mean, it's just culled the entire database. The way the developers have set this up takes seconds to look through hundreds of thousands of starts and to get these answers. And there's your answer right there without dirt and sprints.
Yeah. Those numbers pretty strong there. So yeah, and these were some of the exact numbers that I came up when I did this specific search. So I think that those numbers are useful. I mean, and I wouldn't, again, for people who are watching and kind of using this as something that's educational and who are looking at it and saying, wow, that's pretty neat, and I guess I should bet this horse. That's not what we're suggesting. That's certainly not what I'm suggesting. But I think if you like a horse and you can make a case for a horse, it's these types of statistics that make you feel a little better, before you go ahead and put your bet in on a horse. So they just sort of, they can add to a case, build to a case, but I certainly personally wouldn't make a case based on a stat like that alone. But if you like this horse, you think there's some upside here, and you look at numbers like that, which you can easily search for on Stats Race Lens, I think you can proceed with a bit more confidence.
Well, he's 10-1, so obviously from even regular handicap perspective, you can see a horse broke his maiden, and then 2 bad races, and likely he bled in those races, even though he also faced Classic Empire McCracken. They gave him time off from October to June. He comes back as a 3-year-old. He runs very well. So, he should run better second time out, but the stat helps as well, especially when you're looking at a horse at 10-1 and you think, should I take a shot or not?
Right. Exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
Ellis, some wider thoughts for you on yesterday?
Yeah, I'm looking at, it's kind of not obvious because he's not the favorite, but this 6 Challenger is intriguing for me. A horse that really ran okay his first few races. He was in for a maiden claimer, so Lyndon Rice maybe didn't think he had that much ability, but he blasted off. Claimed out of the race by Rudy Rodriguez, came back and protected in the starter allowance condition, missed by a neck, came back again in the starter allowance, missed by 2, and then came back and won by 4, and that was with the blinkers, and that was the big change. So these are all good races you'd expect to see from a 3-year-old, but then a really good race, and, was that a fluke? Well, he moved him from starter allowance into straight allowance, and he blasted off here, showed a lot of maturity coming from off the pace under Irad, and what an identical base speed figure. Now, really quick, again, it's a short field, but when you want to take a look to see, if that race, if it's repeated, if somebody else improves what the horse can do, I do that when I handicap. And one Skinny Bullet, his best is 96. And I handicap the speed figure is second. Cold Front, who's undefeated, who we talked about earlier, 102 and 106. That's pretty good and very fast. Mo Cash got a 109 last time out, and he's 5-2 because he earned his in the carryback. And then when you move over to Aquamarine, he doesn't have anything break 100, and Excitations hasn't broken 100. So back looking at Toka Challenger, this allowance race effort was as good or as fast as Mo Cash, and Mo Cash is 5-2. Toka Challenger is probably going to go off around that 7-2 odds, and so really he's the horse I'm looking at as my top choice in this race. I can't knock Mo Cash because he's done nothing wrong in his career. He won the first 3 races in his career. There's a really interesting angle here. It's called Jose Ortiz on, which we think intuitively is a no-brainer, so to speak. But this is an angle that we ran a long time ago. I think it's included. It doesn't win a lot, 9%, but it's 87 starters. It's about 7 starters a month. And if you randomly bet every time in a graded stakes, Jose Ortiz gets on, didn't ride a horse last out, so you got a 10% profit. So that's not too bad, and that's significant as well. It kind of goes back to the issue that, the horse running okay, Robbie Alvarado's, staying in Kentucky, riding in Ellis Park, I believe. And this is a decent horse to use as well, a little less value from a win bet perspective as Toga Challenger and Cold Front. So my picks in the race are going to be Toga Challenger. I said because of the 7-2, I'm going to use Mocash if I play any exotics. Probably not going to play an exacta here, but if I play any pick threes or doubles, and I will use Cold Front. But I think he's a nice horse, but a little tough to bet at 7-5. He did come from off the pace. The numbers are good, but his allowance win here at Belmont, this 102, is the second best in the field compared to the tie between Toga Challenge and Mocash at 109, and that's a lot to have to improve, in my opinion.
Well, we'll watch for this group and see how they exit, move toward the Travers, where some of the heavy heads and some of the turnback candidates from the Classic season will be waiting, and of course Bob Baffert laying in wait as well with American Anthem. There's emergent horses. It's going to be very interesting when we get to Travers Saturday to look at the kinds of numbers that were produced the opening days of the meet. The efforts by Takapo on opening day, and then Mr. Crow. Not sure that Mr. Crow is going to wheel right into the Alan Jerkins, but that was a stunning effort, and Takapo absolutely became a Jerkins player. So the sprinters, the sprint division, we'll also see if anybody out of this weekend's races. There's always a chance that the Haskell runners and Jim Dandy runner, Curlin runner will end up cutting back to the 7-8 in the Jerkins. But the now horse in that group undoubtedly is Cold Front. Let's talk about the older sprinters and the two sprint races, the grade ones on either side of the country, the Vanderbilt at Saratoga and the Bing Crosby, which we'll talk about later. The Crosby, just an absolute war, and Drafang finds a very difficult spot for his seasonal debut. But the Vanderbilt has got, I think, a kind of an interesting group that are at some different kinds of junctures in their career. And that, I think, is kind of the backdrop when we talk about, horses like AP Indian trying to recapture that excellent form from a year plus ago. Limousine Liberal has been seeking this kind of a win really for the last 18 months or so. And then there's some horses like an Awesome Banner. Dan, this is a runner that has not gotten much attention, but Ken Decker, who gets horses from Fred Bry, Jacks Are Better, a guy that kind of brings some of the Jacks Are Better horses back from injuries and from layoffs. He's done a very nice job quietly getting Awesome Banner back around, and I know you like him going into the Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I really do. I think this is a horse who could get a really nice setup here, and I think he's a horse who's run deceptively well. He was third to Whitmore and AP Indian in the Maryland Sprint. But he wasn't beaten by much. I think most people, are probably focused on AP Indian and then, the way Whitmore closed in that race. But Awesome Banner, was beaten a half length, and was right there. And so the only clunker you really see here is the experiment with the blinkers and the Carter. I mean, that obviously didn't work out, but you pull that one off the page, and he hasn't really had a bad 6 furlong race going back as far as you can see. So I'm pretty interested in him, and precisely for the reason that you kind of alluded to, which is that you've got horses that are kind of at various stages of their career. Obviously, the big name is AP Indian, dominant at the Spa last year, winning this race in the Forgo, posting back-to-back 117 equibase speed figures. So, maybe he's lost a step, but he did run a gutsy Maryland Sprint. He was caught in the final strides there by Whitmore. His Commonwealth runner-up finish to an in-form Awesome Slew wasn't the worst race off a long layoff. So I think he'll be tough, and I don't necessarily think that he needs to be on the lead. He'll probably be stalking El Deal and Green Grotto. I'm interested to see how that duel and how that pace dynamic plays out because, on paper, it looks like it's going to be a pretty cutthroat battle on the lead there with El Deal, the George Navarro horse coming in with Castellano up for the first time, and Green Grotto, who we know always gets gunned to the lead. And so interested to see how that all unfolds. And I just think with Awesome Banner, I think if the track is playing fair and the pace is as fast as it looks like it's going to be, he could trip out potentially and get a really nice setup. So that's my interest really in Awesome Banner. As far as El Deal, and I know that Ellis has a positive angle on El Deal, but I wanted to point out what I found to be a negative angle. Always curious as to trainers like George Navarro, who we know win at a very high percentage at tracks like Monmouth Park. I always interested to see how that success translates at other tracks. And so specifically, I did a search here on George Navarro at Saratoga over the last 5 years, and that's leaving open, all races, all distances, all surfaces. So just Navarro at Saratoga specifically over the last 5 years. And we'll take a look at the numbers that come up for Navarro here at Saratoga. And you can see they're not great. So you've got 1 for 10. And like I said earlier, I mean, you don't make a knee-jerk decision just based on seeing one stat, but certainly that doesn't quite inspire the same kind of confidence that maybe the earlier stat that we saw did. And so, I do consider a positive sign that Javier Castellano hops on, and I know that Ellis's research on this kind of pointed him in that direction as well.
Yeah, well, we can skip around to it just to show. I mean, you had a negative angle. I think this horse. Let me get the PPs first. I'll go back to true odds in a minute. But I think El Deal reminds me of another Navarro trainee, and his name was Private Zone, and he won a course to forego in I forgot what year it was. Steve will probably remember 2 years ago maybe, because I think last year, of course, it was AP Indian. So I think it was the forego 2 years ago. And El Deal just is a horse that, whatever you want to say about Navarro, he was an okay horse. Okay, won a race at Parks back here for Lakeman. He won for this Francisco D'Angelo, but then he moves to the barn. And the Charlestown race you could probably discount, but this race at Monmouth, the decathlon, I mean, he just ran them off their feet. The pace figure is 125. The fraction was 21 2/10, and he just ran them off their feet. And by the way, this is almost, even though today's Thursday and we're talking about a Saturday race, Ostrolenka just got beat a whisker, pretty much, in the Morrison Stakes at Saratoga. And Ostrolenka had won off of this race. So here you got him beating Ostrolenka pretty handily, and Ostrolenka coming back for a win, and then the stakes placing, even though that was stake bred. So I think El Deal is the real deal. My particular research, again, I guess you could say in some cases you make cases and then you try and validate them, but I was just curious because Castellano doesn't ride much at Monmouth, of course, but he does ride for Navarro. So when I go to this, and I already have a preset, I'll go back to it. Sorry, I already have a preset template for this. So let me go back to El Deal. And of course, as I try and do stuff today, something's not cooperating a whole lot. There you go. And El Deal, so if I look at Navarro and get into individual research, and then I will switch to the with the jockey, which I have here. I have a lot of different ones here, but I have one for jockey. Today's jockey, dirt route. There it is. Today's jockey, dirt and route. So Navarro with Castellano, it's a pretty good thing here. 6 for 14 on 9 different horses. And then if I want to switch it up and see, okay, well, a lot of them are Gulfstream, probably allowance, maybe some maidens, but I want to go now check on stakes because that's the most similar to today's situation. And there's one category down here that's all stakes. So I'm going to go to all stakes. And as soon as it comes up, there you go, 4 for 7. And again, some names you recognize. Catalina Red, Percussion ran second, War Story, and Mia Tori. And 1 win on the New York circuit here with War Story, and then Catalina Red won at Churchill as well. That was back on Derby Day in 2016. So back to the true odds here. I think El Deal looks fast on paper. Dan thinks perhaps not. The projection here has him way in front. The pace is 121, and the next horse is 101. So 20 points on pace at about this is a sprint. So that would be the 2 furlong mark. Still in front here by 3 or 4 points. I think he just puts away, runs them off their feet, and I'll take every bit here. And True Odds tends to agree, by the way, because his True Odds on El Deal is 7-5, and his morning line is 7-2. I don't know if it's going to hold up. Certainly, you can't knock AP Indian, who Dan mentioned we didn't talk about, but there's no knock on a multiple Grade 1 stakes winner, a 2 for 3 at Saratoga, including the Forgo last year, and he really does nothing wrong. Joe Bravo, of course, rides him so well. AP Indian, second here to Whitmore, second Awesome stood up for making the lead, so a little concern. But other than that, his 2 races at Saratoga, back here, the Vanderbilt and the Forgo, really incredible. So he probably likes the track a lot. And then Limousine Liberal on the outside, another really nice horse. 3 straight wins, 2 graded stakes, and then just something to stay in shape. Even money against really nobody who he beat in this race. Jockey changed to Ortiz again. Jose rode him back here. So those are my picks in the race. El Deal on top, and AP Indian, Limousine Liberal I'll use. And this is a great all stakes, pick 4, by the way. Not all stakes, 3 stakes, and then a great maiden race to kick it off here. So I'm going to use El Deal, AP Indian, and Limousine Liberal.
The Vanderbilt, and when compared later, and we'll look at the Crosby in a little bit. I found it a very strange assembly of of the East Coast sprinters. I couldn't get a feel for this race at first pass. We'll come back to it. I can tell you that we had an interesting conversation today on the radio with Jordan Wyckoff from the Three Diamonds Farm operation that his parents run, and he is a big part of. And the presence of Bigger Picture, originally claimed for $32,500, and then steadily improving to the point where he becomes a Grade 1 winner in the United Nations and setting a record. He draws the inside for the Bowling Green, and this was a very clever shift. They had been thinking about the Arlington Million, and instead he becomes a major presence in the Bowling Green. Dan, go through this. This is kind of a fun group, actually, and this has always been one of my favorite races. And of course, it comes one of the races that's been moved up to Saratoga over the years from Belmont, and actually refers to a patch of green land from Wall Street as the origins of the Bowling Green.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, and it is, I mean, historically, I mean, it's a fun race. It's one that you could dig into, I think, and you can come up with a couple of horses in here who you can make a case for. Bigger Picture, I think, is one that, you see United Nations win last out, and you automatically say, well, this horse is a major contender, and I agree with you. I think he is. And watching that replay as well, and I just watched it last night, it wasn't as if, the horse basically, I mean, he did have a solid pace to run into, but it wasn't as if, he, had tiring horses all around him and he just looped them. I mean, he was stuck behind a wall of horses and had to find a seam and, really squirted through and went open. So I think he showed a lot of maturity there too, and he showed some growth. And for that reason, I think he's a major player. Sure, he's been a bit inconsistent, but I think you can also make excuses for him in a couple of races. Was over a wet track 2-back, and then 3-back. Rider lost the whip, and so you could make some excuses for this horse, and you could say, you know what, this horse is really has been in improved form over the past 7 to 8 months, and so I think he's extremely interesting, and I think he'll be tough. The horse that I actually landed on, though, is the 4, Sadler's Joy, and I was on this horse as well on Belmont Stakes Day in Manhattan. So maybe it's just me chasing losses here. I hope not. But
hang on 1 second, Dan. I want to just watch the stretch run.
Yeah.
Take a picture. I want folks to see it. So
yeah, you can see that.
Kind of looking for a spot and get to the rail. Takes the lead.
Yes, I just thought that was impressive, and I mean, again, you could look at it a number of different ways. He did have a nice setup in terms of the pace being hot up front, but he still had to do some work there to get through, and then that was only half the battle. I mean, he had to keep fighting to ultimately get the win. So I was definitely I was impressed with that. So he's going to be on my ticket, but like I said, if I were to give you one horse here at maybe a bit of a price, Sadler's Joy is going to be the horse for me. As I mentioned, I was on him in the Manhattan, so I'm going to go back to him here. Did not think he ran too bad of a race there. He didn't break well, wasn't as close to the pace, which in that instance was a slower one. And, he had to rally wide and was herded out some in the stretch. But I thought he still finished full of energy, and I think that, it was a race that he could sort of improve off of. If we want to get into some stats research here, I looked at Castellano in the past year alone. We could modify here, and we'll get into some of the specifics of this search. But Castellano, and again, this isn't going to surprise many people, in the past year in turf routes, graded stakes in Saratoga. So we'll try to, so here's turf routes to begin with, but if we want to look specifically at graded stakes, and look, I mean, you're looking at 5 wins from 12 starts, 9 in the money. A bunch of horses there that, again, we'll recognize, including the one from last week, Proctor's Ledge there near the top, who was super impressive. So, these are, if you want, there are no sure things in horse racing, but these are pretty good numbers that make you feel good about things. And like I said, for me, the case with Sadler's Joy is really more of a case of thinking that he's headed in the right direction. I think his recent form may look a little, may not look as impressive on paper as it has been in reality. I also think this distance hits him between the eyes. He broke his maiden at Saratoga, going 1.5 miles last year, so I don't think this distance will give him any trouble. And again, if you toss the race here in this instance, 2 races back over the yielding turf, you're looking at, he hasn't really run a bad race dating back about 7 or 8 races to before that maiden win. So, look, does he have something to prove here in this kind of company? Absolutely. Do I think he can do it? Yes. And obviously he'll have to make up a couple of lengths here on Ascend, but I don't think that's out of the question. Ascend, in my opinion at least, had a much better trip, had first run, got the jump on the field, and was going to be tough to catch. That's for me. I'm Sadler's Joy here. And yeah, and as I said, if I were to use two horses, bigger picture would be the other horse for me in this spot.
Ellis. Well, I'm going for it on this one because I really like this horse, Don Julio. Hello, Don Julio. You know, I just think at some point horses make the jump up and get the light bulb goes on and things go right. And I'm just looking at the whole pattern here. Broke his mate first out at Gulfstream, then kind of just didn't know what he was doing last year a couple times. Finally comes up to Belmont, 1.25 miles, a 4-length win against Manitoulin. Is not a bad horse. Comes back a couple months later, runs horrible at Saratoga, 1 3/8. But I don't think that's a Saratoga issue. Just maybe wasn't feeling it because he goes on a big layoff after that. So I routinely draw through the race that led to a layoff. And then he comes back and gets beaten 3/4 at 1 mile 16th and second in the first. And this is the pattern I like, the improving pattern of Echo-based speed figures. He's a 5-year-old, not a 4-year-old, but this is about what he can do, and that's going to stack up real well as we look at some of the other horses here. Now, Jose Ortiz gets off to get on a sin, and for good reason, because he just got a Grade 1 win, but Johnny V gets on, and I got no problem with that at all here on the pattern for Hello Don Julio. You know, he's run the distance. He's run well at 1 mile and 3/8 back here where he was second. 2 races back, that was with Ortiz last. 3 races after his maiden win, and then he's back in form. And I think he's on an up pattern. So this is ridiculous, 12-1 in my opinion. Even though it's a very deep race, and so that'll be my top pick. Hello Don Julio. Another one we didn't talk about is one of the 2 O'Neill shippers, I think, on the card today, or 3 on Saturday from California in Frank Conversation. Another horse that didn't really know what he was doing. They didn't know what to do with him early in his career. He wins down the hillside course at Santa Anita. They stretch him out and try the Cecil B. DeMille as a 2-year-old. He runs third to a decent horse in Dresden Hermes, if we remember. Then he goes to dirt against More Spirit and 2s on ice, and that didn't work out. Back to all weather. He wins the California Derby, wins the El Camino Real. Back on they ship him to Dubai, and that's the end of that. Long time coming back has happened sometimes. 2 races there, but then he wins Twilight Derby at 36-1. 1 mile and 1/8 on the turf, 3-year-old stake, decent field here of 10 that he ran against. Then third in the Hollywood Derby, goes off form, comes back, and his 2 races this year against older have been very, very good. I mean, this is some fight in the last 1/8 of a mile, head and the neck. I mean, he fought the whole 1/8 of a mile down the stretch in this little allowance race against Patentar, who I think won earlier this week. And then he comes back against multiple Grade 1 winner Ashley Love Sugar at 1 1/4 and makes up 1.5 lengths on that one, who was odds on that day in this race. And he's 6-1. I'm surprised he's that low, but Gutierrez comes out to ride him, and that's a solid effort. So I've got 12-1 and 6-1 here as my top 2. I'm going fairly deep here at the pick 4. I'm going to use Sadler's Joy that Dan talked about. I'm going to use Ascend, who we didn't talk about much, but it's run 3 in a row, including the Manhattan. And I'm going to use bigger pictures. So I'm using 6, 2, 4, 7, and 1. But I can promise I'm going to make a win bet on Don Julio, maybe 3-1 or better. And I'll make a smaller win bet on Frank Conversation. I'd love to hear, since Dan didn't talk about either of those, I'd love to hear, Steve, your opinion of either of these 2 long shots. Sort of long shot in the case of Frank Conversation. Dan as well.
Well, they're both, I can tell you that both of these are horses that I've had affection for from early on. Frank Conversation, when he won up at Golden Gate, I thought he was so impressive, and I absolutely put him right in the mix early when I was tracking 3-year-olds, and I wasn't happy that Redham and Doug O'Neill shipped him to Dubai. Why they thought that was going to be a better path for him, but it was gratifying to then see him in the fall when they put him on the turf. And, being out of a mare by Unusual Heat, Unusual Heat, most recently gone, actually, and a sire that gets all kinds of good horses, particularly turf and particularly the horses that go down the hill at Santa Anita. And this is just one of these horses that you can expect to maybe keep improving. When it comes to Hello Don Julio, it's a very different scenario. Michael Dilger, who should have a lot more horses than he does as a trainer, a very, very good horseman, and he's kind of not a guy that is full of personality, let's say, in terms of attracting new owners. But he knows his way around a good horse, and he's been very, very careful and deliberate with Hello Don Julio. And it just feels, I agree with you, Ellis, that it feels like a good time to try him at this level. I mean, the reality is, though, he does find some serious Grade 1 horses here, and even a horse like Sadler's Joy, who's looking to get to the next level himself, as a Grade 2 winner. I am surprised that we didn't talk about Ascend more. Those 3 wins, they correspond very directly to Graham Motion and Arthur Hancock relenting and putting him on Lasix. As soon as Lasix was added, he's been a different horse, and I think he is, even from out there, the horse to beat. And I think he will take some beating. I mean, I think he and Bigger Picture are very serious, deserving favorites in here, but I have no problem trying to either feather in prices or even figure out a way to put either of the prices, any of the price concepts. I mean, for a 7-horse field, this is a really nice group that has got proven Grade 1 horses and horses that belong. So I'm looking forward to this on Saturday. It's going to be kind of an under-the-radar race amongst all the various stakes, but this will be one of the day's best races.
I want to make a point. You talked about, Hello Don Julio, this is the right spot, and he's meeting some better horses. But I'm going to use Sadler's Joy as an example, because Sadler's Joy, broke his maiden last August, came back in September at the first allowance level, and then non-winners of 2, and then it was a little layoff, but then he goes from non-winners of 2 to Grade 3, and certainly he ran against some decent horses into Glebe, and that's where he gets second. So going from second level allowance to stakes, if you plan it right, which of course Tom Albertrani did here and almost got the marbles, and he did get the Grade 2 marbles in the Pan American, is not out of the question. And so a good example here, by the way, too, that Sadler's Joy, when he did it, was 4-1 at the second allowance level, and then he was 8-1 in the stake. Well, you're getting the same thing here with Hello Don Julio in terms of the public undervaluing when that horse can make that move. He's 9-5 in a 9-horse field here in the second level allowance he won last month, and now he's opening at 12-1. So, you're talking about a horse, and I tend to agree that he's not the most probable winner. By probability, I would say, he's probably 20%. If you take the 3 or 4 horses and mix them up, he should be 4-1, 9-2, but you're getting double that at 12-1, and that's when you got to go ahead and pull the trigger.
No, I like it. Let's turn our attention to the 5-horse, the quintet in the Jim Dandy, and a treat when we get to see a Derby winner and a Preakness winner. If everything goes right, we'll fold in a Haskell winner and a Belmont winner by the time we get to Travers. Dan, some thoughts about the Preakness and Derby winner?
Yeah, when I first looked at this race, just kind of at first glance, I thought, look, if we know Todd Pletcher for anything, it's having a horse, like Always Dreaming, fresh off a couple of months, ready to fire in a spot like this, knowing, that this is for all of these horses, you would think, especially for the top 2 in here, a setup race for the race on August 26th. But they obviously still want this race as well. We're talking about a $600,000 purse, And so, but at first glance, I looked at it and I thought, look, Always Dreaming, compromised by, whatever toll his massive Derby might have taken on him, plus the, relentless pressure that he faced from Classic Empire in the Preakness. Certainly willing to forgive where he finished, and would, to that, to add to that, would expect that a big bounce back effort is due. And so I thought, what, without that same kind of pace in here, Always Dreaming, could very well get out, to a nice comfortable lead and run off with it. And then I took a closer look at Pavel, and I'm starting to think that it's more likely that a horse like Pavel, and kind of seeing how fast he's been, that he'll probably go early. And if he does, then you've got, the race will pretty much unfold from there. And I think that you're going to have some decisions that are going to have to be made. Does Johnny go ahead and say, what, this is, I can take care of this horse and I can sit off, or is he going to go and be convinced that he's got the faster horse who needs to be on the lead? I don't know. It remains to be seen how that dynamic plays out. I think if it plays out the way things played out in the Preakness, I think there's a very good chance, and that it sets up for cloud computing. I think even if it doesn't happen that way, I still think cloud computing has a pretty legitimate shot, because I think he's an extremely talented horse. But the pace scenario, remains, I think, the big thing here to keep an eye out for, how it all unfolds from a stats racelands perspective. I just pulled up just again, I did a search on Javier, and I'm trying to pull up the exact search here. Did you have that, Ellis? The Castellano.
What was it? I know you sent me one about Pletcher, but I didn't get one about.
Oh yeah, actually, yeah, I've got my horses reversed. So yeah, it's the Pletcher stat that I wanted to take a look at with Always Dreaming, off of this kind of layoff, as I mentioned. So Pletcher past 5 years, and then you apply dirt, route, graded stakes. So you'll see these numbers here, pretty solid, and that's just, the past 2 years. These numbers obviously go back, if you want to look past 5 years, and again, if you want to apply specifically to Saratoga, the numbers are extremely high. Yeah, absolutely. So, again, I think that's encouraging, and most of the time when I'm running through this, and if I'm giving people stats on Pletcher and Velasquez and Brown and Castellano, you're not really learning anything new, or anything that you probably didn't already know, just from observation. But it helps to know that these tools are available, because in certain instances you're going to find yourself in a position wanting to know how another trainer might do in a similar situation. But it's good to know that the numbers are backed up by, I think, what general observation would tell you, which is that Pletcher has horses ready for spots like this, and for a second start off a layoff. Now, as for that third and fourth start off a layoff, that's when you might want to do some research and figure out how strong those numbers stay. But for this spot right here, for me at least, I see this race playing out in one of two ways. Either Always Dreaming gets to the lead, which he doesn't need, by the way, but either he gets to the lead, is loose on the lead, and runs away with it, or he faces pressure, or kind of just sits off of Pavel. And in that instance, I think cloud computing stands a better chance of winning. So that's kind of my take, sort of 2/2.5 scenarios that I could see playing out. And I guess the third scenario would be that they all sit off of Pavel and he runs away with it, like Cloudman did last year. But that's kind of where I'm at least. I don't know. What do you think, Ellis?
Well, I love Pavel. And the reason is this. I thought this race was one-sided. I read an article earlier this week about it being a match race. Maybe it was on ABR, as a matter of fact. Mm-hmm. And I tried to make a case against Pavel when I started to look at it, because I didn't even want to handicap this race, except for we're going to do the webinar. And one of the first things I did was look at the running styles, folks don't know, of how these horses like to run. I mean, you could look at the PPs and get an idea, but there's no early horse in this race. And then look at the pace, and it projects Cloud competing in front, which I know is a little bit odd, probably not going to happen, and Pavel second. So now I start to see, okay, can I make a case for him? And we know he's coming out of sprint. Okay, and this is where my dear friend Chuck, the former head of all the chart callers in North America, usually just slaps me in the back of the head and says, you don't bet maiden winners going in the graded stakes. I laugh and I go to the window. And this is quite interesting. So first, 4 or 5 things here I'm going to make the case. Now, I didn't do this first. I tried to make a case against Pavel. And I kept looking for things, and I said, okay, now can I justify him? Because he is going to go to the lead. I think Doug O'Neill could read the form, could read the Echo-based program, could read Stats Racelands if he used it, and knows that you've got a short field with a closer like Giuseppe the Great, a horse trying dirt for the first time who comes from the clouds in Good Samaritan, and Cloud Computing who comes from mid-pack. He's never been closer than third at the half mile, and he was second in the Preakness at the mile mark, pretty much, a mile and an eighth mark almost. So, you know, there's only 2 horses that could possibly have the lead here, in my opinion. And this horse coming out of sprint. So first of all, he got a whatever happened to this horse, I don't read. Steve might know, why he didn't make it to races until July of his 3-year-old year. But when he made it, he was fine. 9-horse field, duels on the lead here. Its fractions are very solid, 22 and 45. The pace figures weren't. Traps playing a little faster that day, but then he draws off. He wins easy. It's a maiden race. Yeah, I know. But the figure will tell me it's a 105. Now, I want to go look real quick and say, okay, what are the best horses in this race running? Always Dreaming got a 104 in the Derby, 100. He was on that nice improving pattern, and then he got drubbed. Well, you know the old saying, fool me once, fool me twice. Well, I say drub me once, and I'm off you. So I don't do anything with Always Dreaming here. I will use him, but I have no interest, especially in even money. Cloud Computing's improving. He can run better, but he's at the mercy of Pavel. So now some justifications for Pavel. I'm going to look at something. I did not set these up in advance, but I did them today earlier. You look at Doug O'Neill, and I'm going to look at, this is really fascinating, because this goes to trainer intent, which, Steve, I know you like to talk about, and we talk about a lot in my sheets, and Dan, everybody talks about trainer intent. So this is a horse that was a maiden winner last out, and today's race is going to be a stakes race. And this is one of the great things you can do with Racelands that you really can't do with anything else. And I'm just going to do any stakes just to make it easier in case there was some non-graded stakes, just to make it easier. And I'm going to make it all runners, so I'm going to take out first route, and I'm going to take out dirt. And that should be all I'm looking for here. Doug O'Neill, last out maiden winner in the stakes today. And the answer is 4 for 36. Okay, it's not a big number. I understand that. But when I look at who they were, I see some really good names here. I see Nyquist. I see Shane's Girlfriend, and I see Iliad. And those are some really nice horses. So O'Neill does this. He doesn't do it often, but he does it. They're low bet, of course. Gutierrez or Pratt. He's bringing Gutierrez out from California. He also has a nice horse named B Squared, and Mopatism, who ran second in stakes races off their maiden wins. Another horse called Goma, who we remember as well. So O'Neill is good.
I could say, sorry to cut you off, but what's interesting to me looking at this, I hadn't come across this one. You see that it's not like he just had 4 winners and that was it. You look at all those horses, a good number of them are finishing second and third. So these are well-meant horses who are not being put in a position where they're running over their head. These are horses that, I mean, O'Neill is making an investment. These horses, belong at this level.
That's a great point, 44%. And when you think about Nyquist, of course, that's a rhythm, and so is this horse. Now, I want to know if this horse can go long. So that's fairly easy to do. I want to go back and look at Creative Cause, who's a relatively, I think he's I don't know, Steve, is Creative Cause a second or third crop sire, or has he been?
2 crops. 2 crops.
Okay, so 2 crops. So All I need to do is go back 2 years, but I'll make it 5 years just in case I'm missing something. Last 5 years, and I'm going to go dirt and route, and I'm only going to look at stakes just to see not as horses are winning routes, but I want to know if they're good enough for stakes level. So again, I'm just going to look for all stakes. And I know I'm not going to get a big number, but it gives me an idea. You know, if all the progeny of the sire were 0 for 30, I would say, well, then I'm done with Pavel. If I come back, I look at something different, and I get 4 for 12. It's not a bad number at all. And I see one name I recognize, Twisted Tom, another one, Milton Freewater, who's really good in California, and another one called Nikki My Darling, who won at Belterra Park. So, but this Twisted Tom's a fairly nice horse. I think we'd agree. And so that's fine. And then the last part's the dam. And I'm being an ex-Californian, expat Californian, and knowing this, I don't know the dam's name, but first of all, I see she's by Riasmon. But when I look at her stats right away, the first number that jumps to the top is a horse named Cara Cortado. I don't know if either of you remember Cara Cortado at all?
Yep, I do.
Scarface.
Pardon?
Scarface. Scarface.
From the movie. Well, the horse Cara Cortado won $885,000. And even though he did most of his running on the grass and on all weather, he did have a good three-year-old campaign because he won the Robert B. Lewis back in 2010. And then he was third in the San Felipe, fourth in the Santa Anita Derby, seventh in the Preakness, and then they kind of took a step back, and he came back as a 4-year-old. He won the Sunshine Millions. He was second in the Kilroe Mile. This was a really nice horse. Now, again, he ran mostly on the grass, but the difference is now I already checked the dirt form of Creative Cause. So the horse gets class from the dam side, and he gets dirt form from the sire side. So all I can say is I'm going to bet Pavel will win, and I'm going to play Pavel straight over Always Dreaming and Cloud Computing, and I'll let the chips fall where they may.
Steve Haskin talked extensively about Pavel today on the radio. He had a conversation with Doug O'Neill, and this was a horse that Redham and company were very high on from the get-go, and it did take a while to get him to the races. But a year ago, how different was Arrogate positionally in terms of moving into stakes company in the summer months. So why not? The other horse that in terms of presence and poise, in terms of trip and sitting behind the pace, Giuseppe the Great is not far off of these horses as well. I mean, he's a horse that at the bottom of the at the bottom of your exotics. I find this a very curious circumstance with Always Dreaming, who I would be very, I'm not going to say against, but I won't be surprised if he does not come back running, let's say. Cloud Computing may be the best of the entire division, but I love the old adage, small field, big trouble, and you could, small field, big price. There's all kinds of fun ways to look at small field. Let's move toward the last couple of conversations, and before we do that, I do want to mention a couple of the ongoing promotions that are happening for Stats Race Lens users and the savings during the summer. And this is such a great time to sign on with August, September, October, basically leading you right into Breeders' Cup. And the ongoing promotion is buy 1 month, get 3 months. So you've got the opportunity here to lock in the rest of Saratoga and Del Mar, and then lead yourself right into the fall meets Keeneland and back to Santa Anita as everybody prepares, and back down to Belmont as everybody starts to focus in on the preps toward the Breeders' Cup. And, of course, you should be following Stats Race Lens on Twitter. You should be following Anonymous Man, Dan Tordjman. You should be following Uber Capper, Ellis Starr as well. And if you have any questions ever, you can go and Ellis, show them the link to the forum. Did we lose you?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had my mute. My apologies. Right here in the upper right-hand corner is the link. It's the Stats Racelands forum. We're posting all the new features every week. The developers are adding new features every week, adding angle. Very cool stuff. We got more things coming up in the future, and also you can share with other people. They're posting these Stats Racelands angles that we're automatically generating. They go in the forum quite often. I think it might be every day, and you can also interact with us as well. So it's a great feature for your StatPlan subscribers.
Let's turn to that maiden fourth, Ellison. I know you did some pedigree work, and the first horse that jumps right off the page, the presence of Graham Motion, who may be poised for a huge weekend, and the one horse, Beta Max, who happens to be a half the Lady Shipman, who did some pretty good turf sprinting.
Yeah, pretty good turf sprinting, and I'm really glad to see they decided to put this colt in a turf sprint. You know, I have these angles that pop up. Some are redundant, but this shows up on the homepage for those that want to see. I have 4 angles here. I got Motion when he goes to Lasix, as we talked about, and you made a point with one of the horses we talked about earlier about going to Lasix in the stakes race and the change it made. And Motion's a guy that rarely does start a horse on Lasix, so I wanted to note that. I have that here, that this would be the one here. It's not a great angle in terms of return on investment, but I'll go to it really quick. It is a good angle in terms of win percentage. 25% of the time when Motion starts a horse, a first-time starter on Lasix, they win. So that's notable. And then the next thing I want to check is something like the stats. And as you said, I already have a circle here. You could set this up, by the way, and customize PPs, but in the hover over reminds you what the circle means. First-time starter, damn high percentage. And if I want to check what the heck that means, so I have to go, I can go look, lifetime turf sprints, and there you see, as you said, Lady Shipman. So this is a first-time starter. I decided to look at all the dam's first-time starters, and she's had 4 foals, one won first-time out, and it wasn't Lady Shipman. And I'll look at that one, which is this horse called Just Talkin', who broke her maiden last year in March at Gulfstream at 2-1 with Castellano at 7.5 on the grass, which is 2 turns. She didn't do much since, but I'm only concerned with the precociousness of running first time out. And then, of course, we have Lady Shipman, who was phenomenal, 900,000 on the grass, 12 wins on the turf, 900,000 overall. Started a career, ran third, but that was on dirt. First time her hooves hit the grass, she won by 11. So this Beta Max with Irad Ortiz, very interesting here on a number of notes, as I said, because of the Lady Shipman angle, because of the foals on turf. Go back again. I'll show everybody what that was. That was, if I go back and just click to the default stat in this race, on all her turf stats, 13 for 24 on 4 horses. And it wasn't all Lady Shipman, ladies and gentlemen. It was a lot of other horses. So there's some great turf pedigree here, and Motion, of course. The other one that has some really positive elements, and I'm going to give out 2 you need to take a look at here. It's early in the card, but this is right before, of course, the Amsterdam, so you can play it in doubles and pick 3s. I like the 9, Johnny Ray. And Johnny Ray, you can see 2 circles here. This is a Wesley Ward owned. The owner, John Hagsma and Ward bred the horse. Rosario rides. And again, these are horses I wasn't as familiar with, but when I clicked on the damn Fryland, first turf sprints, 4 for 16 on the grass. If I look at how they ran first time out, because I personally think dams pass along a lot of this early win precociousness. This is pretty good. 5 starters, 3 wins, a second and a third, turf, off turf, and then down the hill, San Nita on the turf. So I'm pretty intrigued by this. And the other thing I was looking at was the sire, who I had not heard of. I'm, again, not as familiar as you guys, Steve. I'm sure you've heard of this. I'd say Iqbal, who I imagine was a Godolphin at some point. Turf maidens, 1 for 9. We talked earlier. Look at all those seconds. So that's pretty good. 5 of the 7 first-time starters finished first or second. And one of them, of course, won first time out. This one at Gulfstream at 5 on the grass. And this also happened to have been trained. You look at all these ones trained by Ward. So, Steve, does Wesley Ward have a connection to this sire that you're aware of? He seems to be training a lot of the runners of this Iqbal.
That's interesting, and I don't know if he does. I'll ask Wesley that because I've been talking to Wesley a lot lately.
He might not like this cat getting out of the bag here, but I think we need to nail him on this because I had noticed that before, that most of those horses, most of those first-time starters from the sire he happened to train. It could be that the breeder, John Hagsma, owns him, and Warden Hagsma, I know, have a number of horses. And then for the exact in this race, just to finish this off, you have to throw in the logical horse that's run, and that is this horse, Ultima D, who ran not great first time out, but second time out, ran second at 6-5, was very well regarded. The winner came back to win again, noted by the italics, and then entered for turf from scratch. So I would use the 2 here, the son of Scat Daddy, who should love the grass, for Ward also, with the other Ward training the 9 and the 1 Betamax for motion. 1, 2, and 9 in the 4th at Saratoga.
Well, and that 9, there's one other thing when it comes to the family connections, to the pedigree on that, on Johnny Ray, the Calbred, the half sister, Lost Bus. That was a wonderful stakes filly for Gary Sherlock. And
oh, that's right. Yes, here she is right here. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, $400,000.
One of my
also very good.
Sherlock's one of my favorite guys out on the West Coast. And speaking of the West Coast, let's close it out tonight with the Bing Crosby, which is an absolute war. It's eye-crossing what we're looking at with this group in the Bing.
Well, because it's a win you're in. I mean, I was a little disappointed when I looked at the Saratoga that you had the 4 stakes and 26 horses, but people can duck right now but you can't duck a win you're in. You need to go for it, and that's why we got this great field of 11 here in the Bing Crosby. It ends up I'm a little chalky. That's kind of against my motto, friends will have friends bet chalk, but I gave you a 12-1 earlier, so hopefully we'll get that home and the Ward horses here. But Roy H is just a horse that, I liked him at 6-1 in the True North. Thought he had a great shot. He was just a horse that's just improved tremendously in his career, and he is a 5-year-old, and I usually don't see this in a 5-year-old, but I mean, he was just mediocre here before that, but something happened. Maybe the blinkers off and on made a difference. I'm not sure. But these 3 races, starting with the race in April off, the July to April layoff. Oh, I know what it was. I'm sorry. It's right in front of me. That's the great thing about Stats Racelands. It shows you he was gelded. And so all these other races, the 10 starts before the gelding, and then he got gelded. He ran 4th. They let him mature a little more, and then boom, boom, boom. The 120 at Santa Anita, the 127 just destroying the field in the True North at 6-1 against a good field, including Whitmore. And he says the line's not on Racelands yet, but they put out an intermediate line. I think he was 7-2 is what I looked at. Let me get my other notes of PPs here. He was Roy H is 3-1 on the morning line, and I would take every point of that because he really is very, very strong in this race. The next horse I would look at here is lost my notes again. Roy H. The next horse I look at here is going to be Ransom the Moon, who is almost as good now. Same thing, same pattern here for a 5-year-old. The change from going from all weather and Malcolm Pierce, who's a top trainer. You can see 19% wins to Phil D'Amato, allowance win, a stakes win, and then he lost by a neck here with a 121. It's very close to Roy H's 127, and so he looks really good. And then, of course, the obvious horse is DeFrong, who's going to be bet. He's 5-2. He's either 5-2 or 2-1 on the morning line, and I think he's going to be odds on based on, of course, the 5 wins in a row. But as we all know, the difference between a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old could be great or bad. You don't know. He won the Breeders' Cup. He's been off. He's been in a lot of training. I mean, certainly here, trained since February, and there's some breaks, by the way. You can see the break here February to May, so he must have had a setback. I don't like seeing all these works, to be honest with you, but he's got talent, no question, and that 118 is solid. I would not bet him to win if you handed me money, but I'm going to bet Roy H. and Ransom the Moon. If I can get 2-1 or better on Roy H., maybe 3-1 on Ransom the Moon. I love them a lot. I'm only going to reluctantly use DeFrong in pick 3s and pick 4 tickets, and I know that Dan has some horses to talk about.
Yeah, with Dre Fong, there's also the the aftershocks from Arrogate, right? So, do you play a short price Baffert off a layoff, and this layoff certainly being more significant than the one that Arrogate was coming in on? But yeah, look, Dre Fong, I mean, certainly on class and accomplishment, it is the horse to beat. But I think for some of the reasons that you pointed out, I would be tempted to take a shot against. I'm not going to lie. Look, I'm a New York guy, and Maryland and New York, and I tend to have have an East Coast bias, and I'm honest about it at least. And so I'll say that just like earlier, we were talking about frank conversation, and I kind of just thought to myself, yeah, you're making a good case for him, but I can't play West Coast turf horses coming east in most instances. I do like seeing the dirt horses that go east and either do well or hold their own, or sometimes don't do well. But then going back to California, I like to see what they're able to do when they go back out. And I look at a horse like Denman's Call, who obviously did not do much in the Met Mile, but I think you could toss that race. He had some trip trouble, but the bottom line to me is that he really isn't a miler, and he isn't one that I like shipping east for that race, going up against the likes of More Spirit and Sharp Azteca. Look, he was outclassed in that race, but I'd have to rank him, a notch below Dre Fong on most days. But Denman's Call is one in Grade 1 company out west. And I think that if Tyler Bays can work out a trip, the pace should also be pretty hot here. And I think the horse could be a factor late. I don't know if I can make a case for him winning, but I think he could certainly be in the mix. And like I said, he won 3 back going 7 furlongs at Santa Anita, so it's certainly not out of the question. St. Joe Bay, we talk about pace. St. Joe Bay is going to be on the lead or vying for it certainly, and so I think he's one that's interesting. I'm curious to see what Dre Fong does and if and how much he presses, or if St. Joe Bay can get out to an easy lead, because if you look at the race a couple of races back where he dead heated with Solid Wager, he was really pressed every step of the way and was super game to hold on. If he can get loose, he might really be tough, and he's got the 2 wins at Del Mar, so he's one that I wouldn't completely lose track of. And then finally, speaking of another horse that was in the Met Mile, ships back out west. It's going to be Solid Wager. So the other Peter Miller here. I like the points that you made on Roy H. I think Solid Wager is another one cutting back off of an eventful Met Mile. Broke open the gate before the race and got away poorly. As I mentioned, dead heated with St. Joe Bay in December. Closed a ton of ground late there. He did get a setup, but I think he just fits better here, and you're going to get a good price. Would not completely overlook Solid Wager. So those would be, again, in filling out the exotics, those would be some of the ones. But yeah, I mean, if I had to make a call, I think Roy H. and the points you made on him were spot on.
I want to just add one thing, and hear what Steve has to say. But the pace projector says Drefong on the lead, and that's right in terms of the pace projector. But now you have to consider a horse's attitude, and St. Joe Bay just does not, as Dan pointed out, he does not give an inch. I mean, he will not give an inch to anybody, anywhere, anytime. He will not sit second. And then you've got a problem because you've got Drefong coming back from, what amounts to almost a 9-month layoff. And how can a horse like Baffert trains him so fast and so heavy with these 47s, 111s? He sat second a couple of times here. That's fine off a short layoff. Off 8 months layoff, and I'd love to hear your opinion, Steve, I don't think this horse can settle. And since St. Joe wants the lead, I think those two might possibly just kill each other off on the front end.
Well, I was going to mention that if you're looking for inspiration to be against Drefong, the inspiration happens to be right at Del Mar, going back, 7, 8, 9 years with Midnight Loot, who came back off a very similar layoff in preparing for the Breeders' Cup title defense that year, and absolutely laid a stunning egg. At the time, Midnight Loot's performance in that Pat O'Brien was received the way Arrogate's performance was on Saturday night. And he obviously came back 6-8 weeks later and was spectacular, winning another. But there is that reference point if you want to be against Raffan. I guess the one difference is that Baffert. The other thing to add in is that Baffert does have 2 shots preparing him here. He doesn't have to come back running, and so it won't be surprising if he is not geared up, and especially after what we saw, and especially given what Baffert had to say about his own decision making when it came to preparing Arrogate for the San Diego. So maybe there is a harmony in there, but I do agree about St. Joe Bay and his intent on the front end. And Peter Miller, after that terrible opening day at Del Mar a week ago Wednesday, he's gotten on track. He went 0 for 9 opening day and then proceeded to win a race, I think the next 5 race days. So Miller got a big hand in here. I like what you said about Ransom the Moon, actually, and I like horses at this time of year that are starting to, that you can see have a forward-going pattern, and he won't surprise me at all. I mean, I loved Roy H. In New York, and that was a nice score on Belmont Day. But boy, if ever a horse seems poised for a regression off a big effort, that would be it. But it is an absolutely fascinating and dynamite assembly for the Grade 1 being Crosby, and of course the Grade 1 that we talked about earlier on the East Coast and Saratoga, the Vanderbilt. Going to pull up and send everybody out into the weekend. Of course, the Haskell on Friday or on Sunday. Don't forget the Clement Hirsch came up exactly as expected. Valdori versus Stellar Wind on Sunday. There's so much to look forward to over the next 72 hours and over the next 2 weeks to lead up to Dan, to the project that will bring everybody in the game to Saratoga for Equestricon. And Dan, we'll see you there, and we'll see you leading up. Ellis, we'll see you there too.
Yep, I will be there for Equestricon on that Tuesday and hanging out on Monday. Look forward to seeing anybody that wants to find me. If you follow me on Twitter, send me a note and see. But I'm really looking forward to it, and some great racing, and the Equestricon is going to be a blast.
Thank you, guys. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, we're pumped, and Steve, excited to have you there and to have Ellis there and to have Equibase and Stats Racelines be a big supporter of it in year 1. And based on some of the early response to it in terms of attendance and what we expect and what we're hearing on the ground there in Saratoga, we think it's going to be enormous. So, yeah, we ask everyone to support it, equestricon.com. Come out, whether you're a handicapper or a fan, interested in ownership or whatever it might be in racing. There's something for everybody. So come on out if you're in Saratoga.
Well, and of course, something for every kind of horse player available at Stats Racelands. Good luck this weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.